think we're getting ready to be on live here. I have another computer over here just to make sure I know what I'm doing. Okay, family, I believe that we are live. But let me just double check because this is my first time like really getting it in like that.
Yes,
So
we're
I believe that
live.
we are live. Good morning, family. This is a great topic today. I'm very excited because I feel like this is very timely in our community and that we really need to be having this discussion more and more. Because I think family, this is a lot of topic today. Great. So I gotta make sure I. So basically today on the show we are going to be, yep, we're live. Okay, I'm good. I have like another computer on the side so that I can know what I'm doing. So basically today we're going to really be talking about um, faith or religion, if you will, and Black unity, and what ways can we kind of unify with each other. And in saying that, my only disclaimer is, I'm about disclaimers, but this is really about unity. So this is not about like trying to tear somebody's religion down. And this is not for y'all because y'all cool, but this is for the audience, people who may be listening, because it tends to be a habit of when we start talking about religion, people's like, my religion's the best. This is not what this is about. This is really about unity. And how do you use your faith to have unity? So I wanted to first say that. That's my first disclaimer on this morning. Um, and so basically, I hear that feedback. I'm sorry, y'all. Give me just a minute. I'm gonna go like that to just mute that for now. So basically, I'm gonna tell you who we have in the room, and then we're gonna really get started. So first, I'm gonna say we have Sister Danielle Williams. I love everybody on here, but Sister Danielle is in Union Theological Seminary School in New York. She studied at UC Berkeley. And this sister's she is a community leader. She does a lot of healing work in her community. I look at it as healing work, but also a lot of political work. So she's a community activist. I mean, she is like phenomenal. So that's Sister Danielle. And Sister Danielle, you are a Christian, correct? I mean, right?
Yeah, you could say Christian follower of Jesus.
I'll take it. And then we have Dr. Funlayo. Am I saying it right? Dear sister? Make sure I got her name correct. I guess I said it right. Dr. Funlayo. I want to make sure I got it right.
Funlayo, yes, you said it right.
Yes.
I'm sorry. I had it
That's okay. I want to
muted.
make
So
sure I almost
you,
nobody's name. But this dear sister is a scholar, a priestess, a success coach, a traveler, and a liver and lover of life. I love that, so I had to say that. She
I
also
should.
is the founding director of the African and Diasporic Religion Studies Association, and this sister is in Philadelphia. And then last but not least, we have your brother Jamil. No, so we have brother Jamil Muhammad, and brother Jamil is a hard-hitting, inspirational community organizer, has served as a pioneering Nation of Islam leader in cities as diverse as New Orleans, Philly, Baltimore, and Atlanta. In his capacity as national spokesperson for the Nation of Islam, Brother Jamil had meaningful and productive dialogue with many Americans' key opinion makers on all sides of all issues. So, we are going to get started. My first question is for you all: what led you into the faith that you practice? And Brother Jamil's a Muslim. Dr. Funlayo, are you an African spiritualist? How do I?
Yes, I'm an Orisha priestess, is how
Orisha
you would.
priestess. Okay. And then we know their sister's a follower of Jesus Christ. So, what led you all to your paths? Let's just start right there. Who'd like to go first?
Let's jump in first.
Yep. Go right ahead.
Oh, I'll jump in. Good morning. Blessings to my fellow guests, and thank you, Sister Rolanda, for having me and for having all of us in this discussion, which is so important and so timely about Black unity. For me, I was actually raised Christian, as those who know me know. My parents are pastors, but for me, Christian theology never resonated with me. But I wasn't one of those who dismissed religion altogether, as some people are wont to do when they reject the religion of their parents. I always knew that spirit was there. I always knew that God was there, but it didn't resonate to me in the way that it was being presented to me. And so, I saw it. I went through a lot of different systems and finally came across African indigenous spirituality in various forms. The first encounter with it was in Ghana. And then I ended up meeting different people who were in the Orisha or Yoruba tradition in New York, where I'm from and was living at the time. And it went from there. Once I found people who were practicing this spirituality, it really it just resonated with me. It was everything that I already believed. It was just the words for it. It was, oh yes, the ancestors, of course, and I've been doing this, and the earth and the air and the river and the all these things that I already felt. And so it clicked very much for me. And ever since then, it's just been it's been a beautiful journey. And I was initiated in 2010, just to put some dates on it. So this is actually in 2008. So this will be my 10th year of initiation. I'll be having a little celebration this June for that.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank
indeed.
you.
Congratulations.
Thanks so much, brother.
Who's next? What made you choose your path?
I'll go ahead. Well, I was born into it. I think
That's right.
I mean,
That's how most
for
of us
real,
get it.
that's how most of us get into it. So my parents are Christian. My mom in particular is Baptist. My dad is Easter, Christmas, Thanksgiving Christian.
Mhm.
I know that also he spent some time in the nation growing up. But for me, I grew up in a home that was really open, a Christian home that was just really open. And for my mom, it was like, I really want you to get the morals of justice, of harmony, of peace. That's what she really emphasized growing up. And so I've gone on different journeys, and even now as I'm in seminary, going through a whole nother journey when you open up and you get to all the translation issues of the Bible. There's a lot that goes on. But yeah, essentially, yet and still, I am a follower of Jesus and the principles that he also teaches. But I also have a great deal of respect and honor for the many traditions that are out there. And I also feel that other traditions inform my spirituality.
I came, thank you. And first of all, I want to thank you for having me this morning with such great guests on the panel. My sisters are accomplished, and not just accomplished because of professional achievement, but they're accomplished because they connect with people. And that's how I came to be where I am today. I was a little boy in a Rust Belt city. They don't like when you call it a Rust Belt city, but Cincinnati is it's the Midwest of America. And my mom was an AME there at St. Stephen's AME Church, the church with the heart in the heart of the city. My dad was an activist in the movement for Black freedom. So it was natural for me to combine the struggle for the freedom of our people with an appropriate religious expression. Now, I could not have said that at age 9 when I stood up at Muhammad Mosque number 5 in Cincinnati and decided that I would be a Muslim follower of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. It was not easy. It was not surgical. It was not neat. It was not clean. But I stood up, and eventually I began to live on behalf of this Islam that I have come to love. I love it because it, like the sisters said, includes other faith traditions as valid expressions of the need for our people to have a connection with the divine as we struggle on the earthly level for freedom, justice, and equality. For my money, of course, I'm not a betting man, but for my money, if you don't have the struggle for freedom in your religion isn't worth a plug nickel. If your religion does not cause you to stand up for freedom, justice, and equality, it's not worth anything. And if we search the annals of history, the pages of scripture, and every country on earth, we won't find any people in quite the pickle that the so-called American Negro is in. So I agree with my sister Danielle that to be a religious person today requires of us that we learn and pull the best from the message of Jesus. I'm reminded of the great theologian and scholar Howard Thurman, who was confronted upon his attendance at a conference of third world peoples that he was representing America and he was representing Christianity, and how could he do that in that time frame in the late 40s when he attended the conference. And Dr. Thurman thought for a moment and he said, you know, I'm not here as a representative of Christianity or Christendom as you know it. I'm here as a follower of Jesus the Christ. When my sister, Dr. Wood, she said earlier that she is a person who understands the interconnectedness of all of God's creation. That's essential to understanding how we can unite as a people to fight for freedom. Because if she said, hey, I've been doing this all along, the air, the water, the vegetation, the earth, the ancestors, the elders, this means something to me. Well, it means something to little Jamil too. So I'm glad to be on the panel with all of you today, and let's get into it. Let's talk about some Black unity. Let's scare some racists to death.
I say, wait, where's my bell? I need my bell on that one.
Yeah, let's give them hell. Let's give them hell this morning.
So my question to you all is, what is the purpose of religion, and how can we use it to get to freedom or to unite? How can we do that? What's the purpose of religion, first of all? Because I'm not really sure if some of us even have a clear definition on what religion is.
Yeah, well, and spirituality, connection to the divine. I mean, that is what the purpose of it is, living a better life. The Yoruba say that we're supposed to have goodness now. We're supposed to have all happiness and prosperity and goodness on earth while we're here. And so the purpose of our spirituality then is to connect with that divine that will help us to align with our grand destiny and do the things that we're meant to do on earth, live in harmony with one another, avoid the pitfalls, right? That's why we have things like divination and ritual. Divination is intended to help you avoid life's pitfalls to the extent that you can, right? To make your life better, to smooth your path. And so if any spiritual path is not doing that for a person, you know, it has to be questioned. And as Brother Jamil said, it should also, for me, and one of the reasons why African spirituality in particular is so important to me, is that the world over, people's spiritual systems represent them typically, right? Their deities look like them. The cultural paradigms within the traditions reflect their values and all of those kinds of things. For us, you know, as Black folks, that hasn't always been the case, depending on how we're practicing particular forms of religion. And so, you know, it's very important that you be empowered by your spiritual system. It's supposed to connect you with the divine. If it's not doing that, I don't know, you know, and also give you a better sense of yourself as a person, make you feel and make you feel connected to that. And so that's why, you know, African spirituality in particular resonated so well with me, because when I worship Oshun, when I worship Obatala, when I look at all of these energies that look like me and reflect me, it makes me feel that connection to the divine so much more.
Yeah.
That
Powerful
it reminds me. Oh, I was going to say, Dr. Funlayo, it reminds me of a quote. It was by Dr. Marta Moreno Vega of the Caribbean Cultural Center.
Yes.
And she said, if you don't see yourself in the sacred, then you are not sacred.
Yes, I share.
Wow.
Yes.
And that I was like, yo, that was really deep and something worth great reflection. And you know, to add on, I think it's like we all have, when you say the purpose of religion, here's another quote. It was something to the effect of, if you are imagining, then other people, you become a part of someone else's imagination. Right. And so what I mean by that is other folks have intentions for the role that religion plays in our lives. And when you look at our history as African captives in the United States, that is clear that other people's interpretation of the Christian religion has been purposeful. They're trying to use it to keep our community subdued and okay with the oppression and slavery that we were facing, and making theological arguments starting from Ham, saying, well, the Bible says Ham's descendants are going to be enslaved, even though that was incorrect. And then they would also say, well, they're saying that, oh, slaves are supposed to obey their masters. And so you see in the Christian tradition is, and it could be other traditions too, when other people have a role that they would like religion to play in your life for the purpose of controlling you. And that's why we have to be really empowered about our traditions and asking these valid questions. Am I being reflected in my sacred tradition?
Right.
Power.
Brother Jamil.
The sisters are what we call in the Nation of Islam, when we sitting down over a slice of bean pie and a cup of coffee, we call this splitting atoms. This is what the sisters are doing already, splitting atoms, because they're talking about the basis of faith and dividing it into clear parts where we can understand it. The purpose of religion, according to the teachings of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, is to connect the believer with the Creator. It is to connect believers with one another, and it's to connect humanity across the board. But those connections have to be based on criteria. You can't connect with somebody that you have no basis to connect with on the basis of righteousness. So I like what I hear my sister saying, that the individual has to see themselves as divine or sacred if they are to be such. If you're going to have any kind of place in your own imagination, then you can have a religion that reflects yourself. But if all you're getting is somebody else's version, you're never going to have it resonate with you. When you said about Ham and the people, the descendants of Ham being cursed to be slaves, I thought about whether that resonated more with us, or whether it resonated more with us when we looked up from our task and looked up at the overseer and thought, and even sometimes boldly said, before I be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord and be free. I'm not with slavery. I wouldn't give a skip who said that we was destined to be what. If you tell me I'm destined to pick cotton while you sit up in the big house and drink mint juleps, you got another thing coming. I don't believe in any of that destiny. So the purpose of religion is to create strong individuals who will connect with other individuals on the basis of principle, and create principled communities, and then societies, and then a world. But that has to be done by strong individuals. You can't have a religion which is seen as a strong organization, but the persons within the organization are weak-minded. The persons within the organization do not think for themselves. The persons within the organization did not decide to be there for themselves. They were shunted there and pushed there. And like the Holy Quran tells us, when you find them and ask them, what are you doing with these practices of ignorance? They say, hey, we found our fathers doing it, so therefore we didn't know anything else to do. I guarantee you that just like Oldsmobile, the Christianity or the followership of Jesus that Danielle is practicing is not what her parents practiced, even though they practiced the best that they knew. If your parents were pastors, Dr. Funlayo, you took what you heard from them, gleaned the best of it, and then took it to make your life what would resonate with you and cause you to connect for divine purposes with other people. Same thing with me. I try to be a little honeybee. I try to flit around and fly to every flower and get me a little something over here, get me a little something over there, and I'm taking it back to the honey hive that they call Muhammad Mosque. And we're going to make some honey, and in that honey, the Quran teaches us, is a healing for man and a healing for mankind. So the best thing that religion can do is heal the sicknesses with which we have been inflicted by an absence from and an estrangement from God, the divine. Whether you say it's Olodumare, whether you say it is Jehovah, whether you say it is Allah, whatever it is, it's missing. Because if we had it, we'd be in a whole lot better shape than we are today.
So my next question is, how do you then interpret sacred text or holy text or your scriptures, or how do you get that out of the translation? Because Brother Jamil, that was a great point you made when you talked about other people's translation. How do you all translate your sacred text for liberation, for freedom, for connectedness?
For me, two things, and this is what I learned about myself going through seminary. My translation is really like my heart and soul at the end of the day, because I recognize that the Bible was written by men. So we're starting with already, I'm not being represented in the sacred out the gate. And I do understand that the Most High can still use these men to speak truth that can guide us in life. But at the end of the day, you still see, in seminary, we're learning about each of the different apostles. We're learning about the context of the time that they lived. And you still see pieces of them in their work. So that's point blank where I start. Then when we're talking about, looking at this sacred text, I go back. What does the Hebrew translation say? I have to look at what is the context of the time. What is the history? What is the social, political context of the time? And that's the way that I look at it. So some of the verses that people look at, especially when you're looking at in some of the Pauline writings, some people will say, oh, well, Paul is wanting people to be submissive, or those are the verses that are used to like keep Black people from going into revolution and everything like that. Okay, let's look at it in its context, right? They were writing to essentially people who were living in a form of Jim Crow, if you will, who are being discriminated against, who are being persecuted, and they're kind of in their writing saying, hey, lay low, but then they also had some countercultural language to say that, resist in a way that keeps you alive, but still resist. If you don't have that context, then you're going to say, oh, well, we need to, turn the other cheek. We need to be okay with Caesar. We need to follow everything that this government does. No, that's not what the Bible says. That's not what Jesus said either, and that's not what Jesus practiced. When you look at the New Testament, is in context. It is about liberation, and it is also very political. So I look at all those things when I look at the text. And so I just don't take it and say, boom. But ultimately, at the end of the day, we talk about critical thinkers. I feel that on the inside, we should also develop the skills to interpret the text for ourselves, and to see what also makes sense, and to do it also in community, and to do it in a way that is, I would say, open. That's my perspective.
Who's next? Brother Jamil, with Islam, how do you translate that when we have Orthodox Islam and Nation of Islam? And how do y'all translate that text where it's liberation for Black folks and we're not like following Arabs?
As I said at the outset of my comments at the top of the show, if whatever religious expression I have does not confront and deal with the circumstances of my people, that religion is worthless to me. Now, the translation of the Holy Quran is perhaps a bit easier, and I really respect the academic travails of Sister Danielle, because she is there in seminary piecing together texts which have various different sources, which have been translated from Aramaic into Greek, then other languages in Latin, then it comes back to the Wycliffe, and then you come over to the Gutenberg, and then up through King James, and whoo, man, by the time you get it, sister, it's on your plate. And then they tell you come, hey, be down here on 122nd Street and figure it all out by 4 o'clock this afternoon. Like that, that's rough, okay? But in the Quran, we have an advantage in the sense that we are still in possession of the original writing in the original language as revealed by God to his prophet Muhammad, peace and prayers be upon him, recited by Muhammad to the scribes, and the scribes then arranged it according to the direction, the inspired direction of the prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, peace and prayers be upon him. And then the Quran became recited and remembered and recollected and reflected upon throughout the Muslim world. That's a good thing. But what became a challenge for us, Sister Rolanda, was that in the Quran, the prophet, peace and prayers be upon him, or in the Hadith, reminds us. He says, 3 generations after me will not be of me, indicating that after the period of time when he is present in our midst and his companions, the Sahaba, and the first 3 generations called the Salaf, or the helpers of Allah, when they were present, scholarship was at a high level. There was a level of inquiry into legal matters and civil matters and how Islam would be constructed as a society. But hey, how you doing? But after that, I had to wave at the people too, bro. But after that, 3 generations, the prophet said that there would be a falling away from him. And we find corruption, we find racism, we find sexism, we find nationalism, we find excessive greed, we find political machinations, we find weakness of character and principle in the Muslim world today. Our Muslim world, Minister Farrakhan spoke to us at the beginning of Ramadan and reminded us, is in a heck of a state. And we need to pull that Muslim world back to an understanding of the original principles that were revealed in the Quran. It's interesting, you know, if we look at this history, if we look at this time in which we live, it is becoming more and more clear that the light of Islam, which the world used to accept on face value, shone from the East, is now being ignited and uplifted in the West among the children of slaves. And the Muslim world is in a challenge now to accept that its brightest light of tafsir, or interpretation of Quran, is coming from black scholars, the children of slaves. It's having to accept that the best expression of adab, or Muslim hospitality and manners, is coming up out of the children of slaves. The Muslim world is being set on its ear because the best academic expression, the best social expression, the best economic and collective work and responsibility expression is coming from the children of slaves that you used to call a bunch of nappy-headed dark ones. You used to throw us in the kitchen. Sometimes you can go to Mecca today and you find black people there, but we are in positions of servitude. We're in positions where we work menial jobs. We're referred to as kafirs and all kinds of other names that are derogatory, not throughout every Muslim community, but we would be liars if we said that there's no racism in the Muslim world. So now the light of Islam is shining from the West, and the scholarship of Islam is now being perfected and brought to its next level by scholars who are the sons and daughters of slaves, with last names like Williams, with last names like Johnson, with last names like Potts, with last names like Wilkins. So the Muslim scholars that you have today are rising up over here. Well, it's interesting to see how that is happening. So we define our text by its utility and relevance in our current situation, in our current plight, if you will, and how we will overcome that plight. I'm sure that Dr. Funlayo has a similar situation and a similar application of her universal understanding.
Definitely bring me to you, because I want to know even how the sacred text in terms of the Ifa tradition or African traditions, how did it become sacred text? And then how do you translate so that those of us here in the West can regain that knowledge from our ancestors in Africa?
Yeah, that's well, translation has always been the biggest thing, and most of the verses have not been translated. Most of it is still in the original Yoruba. You would have to learn Yoruba, and not only would you have to learn it, but you would have to go to learn with teachers, because even the written text is seen as something that's not trustworthy, right? In Yoruba cosmology and thought and philosophy, there's a big emphasis on what's called eleri, the one who saw or the witness. And so speaking and being close to the source of the knowledge is important. And so a lot of this knowledge is still passed down from mouth to ear, from person to person. In the original Yoruba, some of it being translated into English, Spanish, and other languages, based on where Yoruba descendants have ended up in the world, including Portuguese. But one of the differences in terms of the Odu Ifa, and when, of course, looking at the Bible and Quran, is that it does not have this history of domination to extricate itself from, right? It is our original information about us, by us, was not used to dominate us, does not contain anything in it that we have to necessarily reconcile. There are certain things within it, for example, that you see about the status of women, or that you see about certain topics that we, of course, have to grapple with and think about, as Sister Danielle said, what it was in the context of that time, and how different things went at various times when these different verses were revealed. But at the end of the day, it's not something that was used to attack our humanity. It's not something that was used to subjugate us. And so because of that, it doesn't have that history to extricate itself from. And as well, in Yoruba thought, even the deities themselves, anything, as Brother Jamil mentioned, that is not of use is considered something to be cast away. And so even the Orisha, even the deities themselves are not above that. There's a proverb that says, once a deity stops being useful, you cast it into the bush, right? So the idea, and so part of what that talks about is the idea that we don't just blindly follow something because it's what we've been following. We do what's useful. We do what works for us. And if that thing stops working, whatever that was, we throw it away and we use what works. And so that indicates the level of cosmopolitanism that's always been present in Africana thought, that we are not a dogmatic people that just follows blindly behind something because it's what we've been taught. We are a people who consistently evaluates what we're doing. We consistently evaluate everything. And so even as we practice reciting the Odu Ifa and things like that together, they're part of the what happens with oral traditions is that those things that are not of use naturally fall away, right? They naturally stop being repeated, they stop being passed down. And so as the generations go, what you end up with is more and more distilled by that process of analysis. Whereas when you have the written text, it becomes a little more ossified. So even if parts of it are no longer relevant because it's written down, because it's in that state, you're still having to kind of grapple and deal with it. And so that's, there's a gift and the curse to oral traditions, but one of the benefits, I think, is that they naturally evolve, right? Because the information that we're passing down keeps getting analyzed. We keep deciding what we're going to pass and what we're not going to pass. And so that's a part of the power of our traditions, that the ones that are passed down in that way, that you don't necessarily have all this, so to speak, old stuff to grapple with all the time, because some of it has naturally faded out of use and out of practice.
Mm.
So with all of this great information, because all of this sacred text, and it's a lot. It's really having like an arsenal to go to war, to get your freedom, to get your liberation. How do you all see your commonalities inside of your faiths, inside of your religion? What are some of those commonalities that we share across these three in particular? What are those commonalities?
Well, the first one is just God Almighty, right? We all believe in one God who rules, is the pinnacle of everything, the creator of all. And so however we get to that pinnacle that's what it is for all of us, whether it's Olodumare, Allah, God, however we call the name, we know that there is one wellspring of energy, of ashe, of one source. And so that's the biggest commonality I would point out.
Go ahead, Sister Danielle.
I was going to say that I would argue that the Christianity and the Islam that is practiced by African Americans is informed by our African traditions.
Absolutely.
That's why our Christianity looks different in a number of ways from white American Christians, right? Kind of like why at the royal wedding they was like, what is going on here? But I think another common thread is the idea that there are either messengers or sorry, I didn't get a lot of sleep. But that there are messengers and there are intercessors. There are those who are breaking things down to us from the Almighty, Most High God. In Christianity, there's Jesus. I was joking with my professor, Dr. Cruz. I said, "Is Jesus an Orisa?" Because it was a class week.
Yes, it's funny you say that, because when Christianity was first introduced on the continent, to the parts of the continent where it wasn't already on the west side of the continent, it was kind of like that, and that really made the missionaries kind of perplexed to say they don't get that we want them to do away with those Orisha and take Jesus instead. They're like, well, cool, we got Obatala, Oshun, we got all of them. Like, Jesus could go right there with them. He cool, And they're like, no, that's not how this works. You have to just him alone. And that's a foreign concept to have to put down one set of beliefs. You don't put down taking a breath because you're going to drink. You don't put down your heart beating because you're going to walk, right? All of these things work together. And so that's our thought. And so that's funny that you say that.
This is a great conversation. It's a great conversation because when I think of the common, now see, first off, and I have to say this, Mama Ro, I'm grateful for the opportunity to talk with these sisters, because for me to talk with a Harvard graduate and a stellar student at the Union Theological Seminary, I would normally have to get the right seat on the 545 Northeastern from New York to Boston. And have to get on the right Amtrak train, and just by a stroke of luck, sit between these two sisters and the conversation strike up. But it's a good conversation because it talks about the things we have in common. We know that there is, in Islam, the language that we speak is that there is but one God. And we say his name as Allah, but we understand the expression of God coming through various different places. My name is Brother Jamil. You all call me Brother Jamil, okay? But my grandchildren call me Pop Pop. I'm still the same guy, but I'm called by a different name depending on who is doing the calling. You see, there's somebody, I don't want to call her name, she might call me Big Daddy, no, I'm real. I'm playing with y'all now. But everybody, stop it, Ro. Everybody who calls another person by their name defines the one they're calling according to their relationship to the one upon whom they call. And this is essential to understand the Africanness, the original man and original woman, as the Honorable Elijah Muhammad teaches us in his teaching. That originality comes through in everything we do, even if we're practicing it from another person's bringing it to us. Let me show you what I mean very briefly. Have you ever noticed that when you go to Brooks Brothers, there are suit models and the mannequins in the window? But even in Brooks Brothers, if you let a brother put on that suit, it don't even look the same way it looks in the window. It just doesn't. You ever notice that when you go to church at the Vatican, some of you have traveled, you can go to the Vatican and they be singing Vespers, the Lord be with you. And it's real spiritual and whispery and stuff. But you go to a black church in Mississippi in July on a hot Sunday morning, huh? The choir is singing. When I look back over my life and I think things over, see, I can truly say that I've been blessed. I got a testimony. And when they start rocking that choir stand, other people of other ethnicities don't understand, but all black people of whatever religious persuasion or perspective understand.
Yes,
When
yes,
you go to
because
a
it don't matter.
masjid
That music is
of
gonna touch you.
Islam, when you go to a masjid of Islam and you hear the call to prayer being made over in the East, it is beautiful. There's no doubt about it. But when you go to the little street corner masjid in South Philadelphia and you hear that brother stand up and call that prayer, ooh, it'll drive you with soul in it because he got that experience. And so there was a group back in 1970s, don't start on me now, but it was a music group. It was called Dyke and the Blazers, and Dyke and the Blazers out of Buffalo, New York. They had a song called We Got More Soul. And they were singing the song about the fact that our experience put us with that quality, that certain je ne sais quoi, that certain something called soul, and you recognize it in the way we walk, in the way we talk, in the way we dress, in the way we cook, in the way we do everything. We don't even drive like other people. We get in the car and lean.
Robert Farris Thompson calls it the aesthetic of the cool.
That's what it is. Is that Ellis Coast who has that?
No, Robert Farris Thompson. He writes on African art and on what he calls the aesthetic of the cool, and how, no matter what we're doing, there's a coolness to it, and it's cool not only in the vernacular sense of it's cool, but there's a chill, there's a cool energy to everything that we do, even when it's hot. And he talks about that aesthetic, how it comes through in art and how it comes through in our performance, and it's reflected in spirituality.
I love it. I love it.
Yes, yes, but
I was gonna say another thing that was in common, because one of the things that I'm studying, one of the many things I'm studying, is the connection between African traditions and Christianity. And when people talk about divination, Christians will say, "Oh no, divination, no." And then I always think, well, what does it mean when the prophetess starts speaking over you? At church. And
right, prophesizing over your life, divining from what's on high. Oh, yes.
You know what about this situation? You need to stay away from it because it's not good for you. You should do this and so, it's like when you really break it down, you start to see all the different pieces, and it makes sense. Even nature, just looking at nature in the Bible, you have God dividing dividing rivers, speaking to people through burning bushes, just looking at the elements, as well as healing that takes place, real life healing that we see in our traditions. Again, you see a lot in the African American forms of Christianity more so than white forms of Christianity. So there, to me, when I look at all of our traditions, I see so much in common, but that's just me. And there are differences.
It's there. The people who say it's not there are the ones who it's just them, right? Because it's there. And even in the Bible, God says that even something as the casting of lots, I'm involved in. Now, what is God saying when he says that? That even when you cast lots, even things that seem random, I'm involved in. So when we talk about divination and we talk about these things, that's what's happening, right? And so you see that commonality. But there is, I think that we do have to recognize, though, as Black folks, and I just had this discussion. I was blessed to be on another panel a couple of months ago with a Black Mormon sister, actually, and a Muslim brother. And, we were just, again, talking about the history and talking about different worldviews of the traditions, right? And so, what does it mean, for example, that in the Bible, after dividing the night from the day and creating the animals and creating all these things, God gives humans dominion over them, right? What does that mean? What kind of relationship does that set up? What type of energy does that imbue us with, and how does that make us see the divine? And so you see how that connects into, if you want to take it all the way to capitalism, to industrialism, to these are things to be used for our benefit. These are resources that we have dominion over, right? And so really going into those types of issues and saying, yeah, we have to look at what this really means and how we reinterpret this, so that we don't go down the path that it may lead down if we follow it to its logical conclusion.
Yeah, and the interpretation is so key on that piece, because when you look at both of the creation stories, and you go back to the original Hebrew language, things become a lot clearer. It's not about domination. It's about partnership. It's actually about mankind taking care of and loving nature, right? And so it's like, and again, that's another connection that we have. But because we're not thinking critically, because we're not studying the text critically, we take, King James version and we run with it.
Well, and because, as you said, it has been used as a tool for a particular purpose, and we have to be clear about that. These traditions were used for a purpose. And so it doesn't mean that when you break them down to their core, that's what they are, but it does mean that we have to think very critically about the way they've been presented. And as you're saying, go back and reinterpret, do that original look at the original languages, which are very different, some of which even gender things differently, or all of these different types of things, as I'm sure you've come across.
So, Brother Jamil, go ahead.
Now, I just wanted to hop in there and horsey back off something the sisters were saying, because it's very, very important. I want to start with what Dr. Funlayo just said a minute ago, that even when a thing is in reality one thing, but it is used for another purpose, then that purpose of what the thing and for which it was created is corrupted. And the corruption of the purpose of the thing now results in a mischievous or devilish use of that thing. In Louisville, Kentucky, they take ash trees and they build baseball bats. And they're designed to hit home runs or bunt your way onto first base or hit behind the runner. They're not designed for guys in Brooklyn named Guido and Vinny to enforce loans on the street. But the baseball bat is used for another purpose other than what it was originally designed for. The Holy Quran tells us, when you say that Allah, God, is present even in the drawing or casting of lots, so it is with the Holy Quran. I want to show the unity here. The Holy Quran, Allah is referred to as the Lord of all the world. Very important. He's the Lord of all the world. The overworld, the underworld, all the outer world, the inner world. He's the Lord of all the worlds. And then we learn as we study further that the Holy Quran talks about the unity of the people of faith. And it's very interesting the way things are playing out and the way things are falling now. And I have to say it, not because I'm some kind of actor for disunity in America, but American disunity was established long before Islam was ever uttered among the so-called American Negroes in 1930. Disunity in America was a reality before the Honorable Elijah Muhammad heard the call of Master Farad Muhammad, to whom praise is due forever. Islam was not even a thought in the minds of most Negroes, and it was already division in America. So don't tell us we started division. But look at this. In the Holy Quran, it reads in the 5th chapter, verse 82. It says, "Thou wilt certainly find the most violent of people in enmity against the believers to be the Jews and the idolators." You see, "And thou wilt find the nearest in friendship to the believers to be those who say, we are Christians. That is because there are priests and monks among them, and because they are not proud." Now, this is established well before the context of black folks in America. This is revealed 1439 years ago. But what is it about the truth in our divine writ that causes us to be able to pull together? That is that we realize that our people are our people. As a Muslim, you're not going to get me to come against Christianity like it's some odd idea practiced by foreign strangers. That's my Aunt Cleo, who is the chairman of the usher board. What do you mean? That's my Uncle Henry, who is the deacon over there at St. Stephen's. What are you talking about? I know Pastor Childs. I grew up with his children and the Oliver sisters and all of us that came up in church together. What am I talking? These are my brothers and sisters. So I cannot tell you that they're some strangers. So what I hear and what I'm talking about is the unity of not just concepts, but the unity of practical expression of faith. The practical expression of faith is that there is what the Christians call the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have other folk do unto you. There's nothing in any of our faiths that would violate that. Right. There's nobody in any faith that can tell us it's all right to steal and kill and rob and destroy. Nobody can tell us from any spiritual perspective it's okay to get a package of dope and sell it in our community, or pimp out our daughters, or molest our sons. And until we begin to protect the most vulnerable in our community and empower those who have been marginalized and discriminated against within our own community, when we begin to hear women and understand the divinity in the woman is the divinity that will help us understand the divinity in the supreme being, that the secret of God is wrapped up in the woman. But if we continue to be misogynistic and chauvinistic, if we continue to be hateful toward women, we just little airsats, fake wannabe pleatherized white boys. And we can't be little fake Europeans running around hating what they hate, doing what they do, and acting like they act. We have to become real, holistic, organic Black folk who have created the original man and the original woman. And that's why I'm so glad that I heard the voice of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and I heard the voice of Minister Louis Farrakhan telling us that, brother, we're going to make these bridges, and we're going to walk across them as we build the structures of Black unity. Today, we can't argue with one another. I'm going to leave the point by saying this. Minister Farrakhan told us that one mother taught her child that before, kindergarten started, she said, look here, baby, I want you to have an edge. So I'm going to tell you now, 5 + 2 is 7. So when you go in there, you're going to know that 5 + 2 is 7 when y'all get to starting that arithmetic here. All right, here's your lunch. Don't forget it. Get mama some sugar. Go on to school. Now, 5 + 2 is 7. All right, mama, I got it. Another child down the block, her mother taught her that 3 + 4 is 7. Same story. Gave her some sugar, gave her an apple, and gave her lunch and sent her to the schoolyard. Around the corner, there's another child. It's a Muslim family. They want to be fancy. They taught their child, look now, the square root of 49 is 7. They got to be fancy. Square root of 49 is 7. So they all get to the playground and bragging about what their mama taught them. My mom taught me that 5 + 2 is 7. Y'all don't even know that. And then the other girl, you think he's so smart. You think he's so smart. Here, hold my double Dutch rope while I get this boy straight. Let me tell you something. Leotis. 3 + 4 is 7. You thought you was smart. And then here come little Kareem. He come around the corner. Brother and sister, excuse me, let me interrupt you to tell you that the square root of 49 is 7, my brothers and sisters. So now they all arguing because they playing the dozen. Your mama don't know what she talking about. My mama don't. See, they're all expressing the same value, but they're expressing it in different terms. Right. We need to not get caught up on the terms and learn divine mathematics so we can understand and listen for that value. And the value is freedom. The value is justice. The value is equality. The value is the rescue of a community in dire straits. And if you don't want to save Black people, you ain't worth a quarter. No way. I don't care how much you can recite Quran. I don't care how much of the original tradition that you recall from the West African griots. I don't care how much how much you know
for real.
Up on the choir stand and sing Ave Maria and going up yonder and make it all sound pretty. But if you don't save Black people, you are worthless to us. So your religion must be expressed in terms of what about little Peter Bug and them down at the corner? And what about Shaquanda and them up there that don't know how to take care of themselves and the babies they got? What about Mr. Sylvester and old Mr. Roosevelt and them down there that can't even go get their check every month because they're afraid? What are we going to do about our communities? That's what religion has to really mean. We got to save our people by Allah's grace, by the grace of God. We got to save our people because it is the will of Olodumare. It is the will of whatever Orisha is closest to us. If it's Obatala, if it is Shango, whatever it is, that energy that we drive toward, we need to use that energy for the resurrection and rescue of our people. If we're not, we ain't worth a dime.
We're doing nothing. I say.
We be like James Brown. We be talking loud and
I'm with
saying
it.
nothing.
Yeah, well, that's the whole thing, taking it out to the street and also pointing out to them where they're already doing it. Like, one of my favorite things to do is walk up to a group of brothers about to drink a 40. And when they pour that little bit out and say, oh, I see you pouring libation for the ancestors, brother. That's what's up. And they turn around and look at me, right? Because they think I'm about to chastise them. They see how I look and they see what they're doing. And they think that, oh, she about to say we should, or whatever. They're ready to be ashamed,
Right.
as opposed to me saying, no, we're not, puritanical. Africans ain't puritanical, okay? We don't have those same Victorian ideas of purity that were passed down through Christian ideals that say everything has to be all covered up and you can never drink and no sex and no this and no that. Sex makes the world. We don't live without sex. So there's no vows of chastity. There's none of that. However, there is responsibility in how we deal with those things. Just like in the Bible, how it says that you're not supposed to be drunk. And Ifá also says that you should not become drunk. It doesn't say you should never drink alcohol, but becoming drunk, losing your faculties is a different thing. And so that's the kind of thing, and I'm so glad you mentioned that, Brother Jamil. I think one of the biggest things for unity for all of us, is to stop being scared of our youth. Get out there. Like the older folks are afraid of the youth. They don't even want to make eye contact. They don't want to speak to them a lot of the times. And I get it, because a lot of our youth are far gone. They're killing each other. They're killing us. Like, when you look at these shootings and all of these predominantly young men doing these things, whether we look at the school shootings, so we see that on the white side, right? And then on our side, when we see most of the violence that happens in our communities, it's young men committing this violence for the most part. There's some young women involved as well. And so we have to understand what has gone awry, what can our systems do to bring this back together. And Malidoma Somé speaks about how one of the things that's missing from our communities is these rites of passage. Right. And so when young people don't have rites of passage, they don't have anything to mark the movement from one phase of life into another, they create their own. And so for them, it might mean, jumping people into gangs, or you have to go out and kill somebody to prove you're a man, as opposed to maybe back in the day, okay, you had to go out and hunt and kill an elephant or do whatever it was that you had to do. They're recreating these things and in negative ways. Right? That's stripping the value from them, as Brother Jamil pointed out, so that instead of building us up and instead of proving manhood and proving womanhood in a positive way, we're now doing it in a negative way. And so a part of, what it's incumbent upon all of us to do with our traditions is to really find those points where we can connect with those outside, because preaching to the choir is cute, but it's not going to get us anywhere. It might make us feel good to have everybody like, yes, yes, yes. But if you don't have a few people saying no, that you have to, that you have to bring along, that you have to pound like the yam, as Ifa says, and make it smooth. If you don't have a few lumps that you have to pound out, then you're not doing it right? The natural yam, there's going to be lumps. It's not that powder stuff, right? There's going to be lumps there that you have to pound, you have to smooth. And so that's an important part of the process too.
Let me throw this question in there really quick. So you just talked about ancestors and then you just talked about young people. Is there anything in your sacred belief or text that talks about the respect for ancestors and why, and respect for young people or the yet to be born and why?
Yes, absolutely. There's a Yoruba proverb that says, the child's hand can't reach the top shelf, but the elder's hand can't reach inside the gourd. Right? So each of us have something that the other needs and that is useful to the other. So we have to listen to our youth. They also say that the youngest palm frond is closest to heaven, right? So if you see how a palm tree grows, the middle of it grows out like this, and then as it ages, the fronds bend down away from the light. right? And so that young frond is the one that's pointing up, that's absorbing that light of heaven, that's getting that divine energy that, and we say that all the time, out of the mouths of babes, right? That's an African American thing. We say it all the time. We know that children and young, they are the ones who have always pushed forward for the change. We look back in the civil rights at SNCC and at all these things. You look at Fred Hampton, you look at these people who were in their 20 years old, 18, 19, right? That's the people who drive change always. And so the Yoruba say that. And so there are ways in which, the mentoring and all those kind of things are not there, right? That were there. I mean, there's a lot of breakdown so that we see this huge divide between our elders and our youth. And that's a huge, huge, huge part of the problem because the ancestors are not being properly venerated. We have young people becoming they wouldn't be considered ancestors, but they are becoming departed spirits that are uneasy, right? When we see all of this stuff and people not being properly buried, people not being properly venerated, violence happening and children passing before their parents, which according to the Yoruba is a curse, right? It's not, you're never supposed to see your child die before you. We should never, ever, ever have that happen. That's a curse. And so many of us in our communities, we have this curse repeated over and over and over and over and over on a daily basis. And it renews that energy. And so it's really, really important for us to really find that way to break that curse, to say I'm not going to see any more of my children pass. How do we stop this? What do we do? How do we get out here? How do we give them, right? Not how do we take away their guns, right? Because we can do that, but how do we give them something to replace that? To say, listen, instead of this gang initiation you're about to do, why don't y'all come over here? I'm gonna take you out to the bush. You want some danger? I'm gonna show you some danger. Let's get out here. Let's do something. Let me show you how to build something, or whatever it is that it's gonna be.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. That's one of the reasons why, Sister Rolanda, the the attraction to me as a 9-year-old to the Honorable Elijah Muhammad was the idea, the concept of building a world independent and free of a world that I knew. And this is where I'm going to take the prerogative of seniority in this group.
All right.
Okay, you see the silver cloud up here, don't you? You see the silver cloud?
Yes, sir.
Okay, yeah. Look here. That means I've been around on this planet for a minute. And one of the things that I remember from my childhood, sisters, was a period of time of segregation. Places that we couldn't go in a northern city. Ostensibly, Cincinnati was a northern city, but it was segregated. Certain stores where we couldn't shop. Right here, where I'm speaking to you from in Washington, D.C., there were places where you couldn't try on a hat. Downtown department stores that didn't want your business. There were places where we were openly called nigger and told to get away from that section of town before dark. When the schools were forcibly segregated, we had to fight every day in Cincinnati. And so I'm sure it was that way in other places. Even if it wasn't that way in New York and parts of California, I guarantee you in the inner part of the country, in the middle, we had to rumble. And let me tell you something. That part of this society, this world, means that we saw a place for our elders of honor and respect. We must take certain cues, and I'm telling you, there's nobody that we have to imitate, but we have to begin to look at what other people are doing successfully. What other cultures do successfully is that they live together communally, and they live together on the basis of shared value, shared resources, shared space, shared wisdom, shared energy, shared joy, shared and deflected pain. Therefore, the atmosphere is more holistic in that place than it is in the silos of isolation, which our individuality drives us to as Negroes in America. See, one of the worst byproducts of integration was hyper-individualism. Hyper-individualism. I got mine, you got yours to get.
Exactly.
We didn't used to do that. It used to matter who you were connected to. When I would go out and do things, my mother would tell me, you reflecting bad, not on us and the family, but on black folks. You're going to make it hard for the next brothers to go here. You're going to make it hard for the next sisters to actually visit there. So we had to carry the weight of our people. Younger people today don't feel that because individualism has taken the place of collectivism in the Black experience. What we're talking about today is collectivism on the basis of spiritual traditions, which have been the lifeline to our people for eons, for ages. And so what we're looking at now is the beauty of unity. There are three of us sitting here on the panel with you today, Mama Ro, and I'm thinking about watching as my mother would do my sister's hair and how she would take and comb it out. And then when she got it to the point where she could work with it, she'd take one strand and then two strands and then three strands. And then she'd get to plaiting that thing, boy. And then plaits would go in and, you know, it start out real thick and she'd work it all the way down to the end when it get real small and put that bow red on it. Clip. My sister was ready for school or church. She was ready to go and do her thing. Why? Because there was the unity of the three, which brought discipline, which brought order, which brought more beauty, and which made her presentable to go out in the world in which she would encounter other people. Let's make our communities presentable by intertwining the various threads of religious and spiritual thought. I love the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. You know why? I got to tell you, not just because he looks so sharp in his suits and stuff, not because he got that hair with the little part right here, you know, not because he takes that handkerchief and wipe under his chin and then throw it on the podium real slick. Like, no, I'm not talking about that. Not the external Farrakhan, but the man who is a man who taught me how to love my people. I wanted to love Black folk, but I needed to know how. And so when I saw the minister embrace my dear brother, the Reverend Ishaka Musa Barashango, the author of the book African People and European Holidays, A Mental Genocide, it was refreshment to me. When I saw Minister Farrakhan embrace a brother whom I had met in my living room when I was 6 years old, the great Kwame Ture, known before that as Stokely Carmichael. When I saw Minister Farrakhan in love with our brother Imam Jamil Alameen, who I met in my living room because my father was the chairman of the Cincinnati chapter of SNCC back in the 60s when I was a little boy. I saw H. Rap Brown come in my home tall and regal and serious and focused with that afro and those dark Ray-Bans and those bib overalls and that turtleneck and that leather jacket. And I looked up at him. I was scared. And my dad said, son, tell Rap how you doing. Give him the greeting. And I said, hey, peace. He looked at me and said, peace, little brother. And I loved him because he was focused. But I loved Minister Farrakhan because everywhere that we went, everyone that we talked to, the minister found a way to love them. And it reminded me, because everything always reminds me of a song, but it reminded me of the old Gamble and Huff song that he gave to Motown. It was called, I'm Gonna Make You Love Me. He said, I'm going to use every trick in the book. I'll do anything to get you hooked. Oh, baby. And he said, every minute and every hour, I'm going to shower you with love and affection. Look out, it's coming in your direction. And I'm going to make you love me. That's the determination of a heart to love the object of their love in spite of the indifference or insouciance or nonchalance or even outright resistance of the object of the love. See, you got to love Black folks today, regardless of your religion. You got to love Black people more than they hate themselves and more than they hate you for telling them that they should love themselves. But I don't care nothing about they hate, because I've been with the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and Minister Farrakhan, and I'm fired up about this thing, because I've been with Mama Ro, because I've been with Sister Danielle and Dr. Funlayo. Shoot, I'm in love with my people. I'm going to love up on them today. I might not have wanted to, but y'all done made me do it now. I'm just going to have to go love up on some Black folks. You know?
So Brother Jamil, what and sisters, what information or what piece of advice could you give someone who is in their spiritual tradition but struggle with staying on their path when it seems like there's a lot of people who don't necessarily see it the way that they do? Because we're talking about liberation in Black folks inside of spiritual traditions. We have this everywhere. Like, we have Muslims everywhere, we have Christians everywhere, we have traditionalists everywhere, spirituals everywhere, but we're still somewhat in the same condition, if not worse, because somehow it's been co-opted. Like all of us, a lot of people was watching the royal wedding when we know that these people destroyed Black folks all over the globe, but
Don't do it.
somehow we were still celebrating it,
Don't do
wrapped
it.
up.
Don't do it.
No, no, we
But
were
no,
wrapped up, and the
you saw
choir
what
was
I
there,
said, and
and the
I'm
minister was
surprised ain't
there.
nobody come for my neck, because I got, like, that post got almost 2,000 shares yesterday.
I
But
shared
I
it.
mean, the reality of it is that the reality is, unfortunately, as Brother Jamil, a lot of our issue, it's not about religion, really. It's about our lack of unity with one another. And that's really just is we have bought into, and I would say Black Americans even more so on some level than our Caribbean brethren and continental brethren have really bought into this individualistic BS and this, my business and I'm gonna get mine, and very, very, very individualistic. You don't see the susus like you see in the Caribbean community. You don't see the communal education of children as you still see in many African communities. So we have pieces of it. But I think, part of what's going on and a lot of what we haven't addressed in a way is that the Black church has been a very strong institution in the African American community. And a lot of the things that we did as a community often went through the church. Now that we're seeing more and more people finding different spiritual paths, the power, that energy that the church had to congeal people in that way is being dispersed. And we don't see those same things being replicated in the community. And so that's why for, the past several years, I was the executive director of the Orisha Community Development Corporation, because we were saying, look, we need to take a clue from our Christian brothers and sisters. This is not just about going to ritual and beating some drums and wearing African clothes, although we look cute, right? It looks real cute. It's nice. All of that, but that's not what it's all about. It's about helping the community. Why don't we have no Orisha worshiper soup kitchens? Why don't we have, whatever it is that we need in the community? Why aren't we doing that for ourselves? And so that was a part of the impetus for that organization. And that's something that I think is very necessary to still have, regardless of your tradition, to have that spirit of charity, to have that spirit of giving. The stories of Obatala in Orisha tradition talk particularly about charity. Any person who is physically or mentally disabled as a child of Obatala and traditionally could go into the market and take what they needed, right? So that was one of the original forms of social giving and those types of things. And so these paradigms and of course with both Islam and Christianity, you have these paradigms of giving and charity. We just ain't doing it. That's the bottom line. My thing is, whether you Muslim, Christian, whether you believe in God or not, do it. Go out there, talk to somebody, put your money where your mouth is. Let's get to doing something. It's not about, and I think that honestly, people get so wrapped up in debating about stuff because it absolves them from having to do anything. If we sit here and talk about, well, Allah this and then your Bible and your Quran and your this, and I could, if we all sit here and have that conversation all day, then we don't ever have to do nothing, right? So if we say, look, we understand, as Brother Jamil pointed out, we're coming, we have different means to get to the same value. Right? As Sister Danielle pointed out, we have so much of each other in our traditions. And so let's just put that aside for a minute. What we need to do today, they killing us today. And whether we asking Allah, whatever way we burying our youth, we still burying them. So how do we stop that?
So Sister Khadijah Greer said, I had to read her. It's a lot of comments in the room, so I hope I would go back and answer some of them like you always do.
Yeah.
But
Absolutely.
Sister Khadijah said, we don't have a problem with finding God. Our issue is finding God in one another.
Yeah, Ashe.
Now that was heavy.
Hold up, I gotta get my shaker on that one.
Yeah, that was like that made so much sense to me, honestly.
Now, and Sister Khadijah, if I'm not mistaken, that's my sister from northern New Jersey, in Paterson, New Jersey. She's a good sister, and she lives the ethic that she just shared with us. She's doing what Dr. Funlayo just said. You got to live what you're talking about. Live the love that you write about, that you sing about, that you preach about, that you study and that you intellectualize. Live that
Right.
love. Some of us can't write. Some of us cannot access the academy. Some of us are not able to navigate the campus. But in the street, we can practice in reality what's being studied in theory. And we can make a difference in the lives of our people. So we need all of us. I love that wonderful proverb that the child's hand cannot reach the upper shelf, but the elder's hand can't reach inside the gourd. We all need each other. See, there's wisdom. We say it in the Nation of Islam, old men for counsel, young men for war. That means there's a place for everybody. In the streets, they say it a little bit different. They say you got the baby lokes over here and the double OGs over there, but everybody's showing somebody. And we got to understand that we must pull our people away from the rites of passage into death and make our way into the rites of passage into life. You see, I was taught certain things at an early age before I came to the mosque. Come on, shake the shaker, sister. Shake the shaker just one more time. I need to see it because, see, yes. See, I was taught certain things before I came to Islam, and I was taught things after I got there that made it hard for me to stay there. Y'all will figure that out in the car on the way home. But let me tell you something. We have to be able to deal with our people where they are. That's why I love you, Ro. I'm gonna put you on blast right here to say this. Sister Rolanda, Mama Ro, to all of us, she walks the walk that she's talking about. She's there with young people, whether it's in Sacramento, whether it's in the Bay Area, whether it's in Philadelphia, any other city in America, whether she's on the road trip, which is grueling. I've done parts of the road trip and couldn't hang. You know, I drove from Philadelphia to Washington. I had to get out. I couldn't deal with it. No, I said, what, you want me to drive all the way from San Francisco to Oakland? Oh, I can't do that. see, I was in a rough place with that. But Sister Ro, you live that. You take those children on 3-day retreats out there to Dillon Beach, and you stay with them in a home, and you cook. Some of them have never had a wholesome meal in their life. And you put a plate, you and Sister Javon and the sisters and Brother Darrell and the volunteers and Brother J. Moven. See, what y'all do is give life to the people. There are heroes all across this country that we got to celebrate. There are heroines that we must celebrate. And the Orisha Community Development Corporation, that is believers putting into practice the principles in which they believe, man, that's the good stuff. What you're talking about, Sister Danielle, in actually working with our people on the basis of the scripture and taking the understanding of the Pauline letters, the epistles, and putting them in practice, because there's somebody in Black America who resembles the church at Corinth. There's somebody in Black America who resembles the church there at Thessaly. There's somebody in Black America who's just like that church over there at Galatia. So we need to understand how we apply that preaching, apply that teaching. So me, I may not be a doctor of the whole theological thing, but I'm going to be a nice pharmacist. Whatever the doctors put together, I'm going to put it on the wound and wrap it up in some bandages. And, you know, I may have to slap you around to get you to be still. I didn't mean that. I didn't mean that. Because if I slap a brother today in love, then y'all going to say I didn't really love him. So let me stop saying that. I love you, brother. But be careful.
So my question, I just want to say this one more again, as they say in some parts of the South. How do we use this sacred text, this spirituality, to break that hold that is on our people? When I brought up that royal wedding, I don't know how the wedding was royal when these are people that enslaved our people and still reap the benefits and still enslaving us around the globe, and how we tend to make a fantasy out of something, even inside of our religious belief.
Let me just answer very quickly, Sister
Okay.
Ro. Let me answer very quickly. You all know the story and the legend and the truth and the history of our sister, Mother Harriet Tubman. Harriet Tubman understood that all people who had been afflicted with slavery did not want to be free.
All right
Some did
now.
not know that they were slaves, and some who knew that they were slaves and made the first few steps on the way to freedom were overcome with cowardice and fear and love for their oppressors. And so they would get out about 60 miles away from the plantation and have to rest for the night in a bayou or in a swamp or in a low-lying area. And it would be mosquitoes and be crickets and frogs and stuff to scare you to death out there. You out there, and sometimes they grab the front of their pants legs and bend over and say, listen, Harriet, look here. Y'all go on ahead, okay? Y'all go on, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back and throw Massa off the scent. Y'all go ahead and be free, but I can't really do this no more. And then all of a sudden, in the darkness and the gloom of night, you would hear a loud sound, click, and that would be Harriet Tubman taking that pearl-handled, chrome-plated 38 and putting it up to the temple and telling that Negro, either you going to be dead or you going to be free, but you ain't going to be both. You're not going to compromise the freedom struggle of our people because you are weak. Some of our people are weak. They don't want nothing, and you got to let them go be with who they want to be. Every one of our scriptural histories and historic texts and historic records are full and replete with the level of that. See, there's a punishment and a consequence for the violation of divine. When you go against what is God's will, you got to be dealt with. Everything is real now. You got choices in this thing. God wants to save our people, yes, but you ain't gonna black your way into heaven. Blackity black, 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 black on, black, black. You're not gonna black your way into heaven. You're not gonna African your way into heaven because of the accident of DNA. Just because I'm a greater percentage of African than you are, Sister Rowe, doesn't mean that I get to be on my way to heaven before you are. Just because you, by your ancestry and DNA percentage, you're not as African as me.
You know
that
what,
Jamil? That means that I have to be willing. I have to be willing to understand that it's principle and righteousness. So Minister Farrakhan said to us that in this hour, it is our righteousness that will sustain us, not our blackness, not our cultural identification, not spouting phrases and catchphrases and slogans and chants. No, it's how committed are you to the principle. That's why we can be free. I'm sorry to talk so much about it, but I'm fired up. Y'all got me fired up and got me out here. I'm glad.
I just feel like this weekend was a great example of that. Like people just defending. It's like it wasn't about love, because nothing, when you rule over people, it's never really about love. Let's just be clear. It's about building your empire and not seeing other people as human beings. And to hear, because I did repost Dr. Woods, I did repost your thing, and people were like, why would you post this? And I had to defriend some people because I'm in this stage of my life where I ain't trying to rock
I didn't even get to the unfriending part.
Yeah, I unfriended some people. After I went in on them, I defriended them. But my thing is, like, you're going to get mad at me for questioning things that you should be questioning about yourself. How is it royal? And where is your spirituality? I am, whatever it is you claim to be. How can you not ask yourself that question?
Well,
Danielle's been waiting to say something. Please, sister.
So I do think, and I think that we should question that. And I also think when I look at people's comments on the feed, I see some people who felt proud or who felt happy for a Black mother whose daughter got married. Right now, I'm just saying, I don't think that everybody bought into the idea that this is progress, that we're free now, that they are not colonizers. And so I kind of piece out where people are at now.
I have to even push back against that, though, because, so a Black mother who's also married to a powerful white man, her daughter got married to another powerful white man. This is not so like another sister pointed out, people are bringing out the mother as though she's some downtrodden, Black mother that was sitting at home with her heart broken, slumped over, wondering if her daughter was ever going to give me a break. She's married to a very powerful white man who has ties to the royal lineage in his background, which is part of the reason that some of the folks were saying this is probably even being allowed to happen. right? She's not some poor downtrodden woman. She buys into the axis of power, and she's very elated for her daughter to now be even higher in that axis of power than she got. So
Hmm.
there's nothing to be celebrated as far as I'm
Nothing,
concerned.
nothing at
Yes,
all.
and
So
to be clear, my thing
I mean, and
is,
I'm sorry to cut you. I didn't mean to cut you off, but that just, that whole thing, because as people have been sharing the pictures of the mother, like, oh, and just this black mother, and I'm like, come on, look at her own values and who she has aligned herself with. Her daughter, I mean, come on, the girl's
right,
in the whitest sorority that ever was. It's not, all of these kind of things. Like, let's keep it
I
real about who we're talking about.
right, and I appreciate. I didn't know that information. I didn't know anything about her
Yeah,
husband or anything like that. But I do encourage us to meet our people where they are, because if we throw everybody out, we will be
right.
repeating what we're saying we can't do here. Now, there's some
Understand.
people who will not change, and
Right.
so you got to
Well,
go to
and
where
those,
it's
and we don't want them, quite frankly, because they're
so
gonna be the ones to turn back and tell Massa what's going on. They're gonna be like, oh, well, you
exactly.
know what? These Negroes is tripping. Let me go tell Queen Elizabeth what's happening over here.
And let me be clear on something
there
real
are
quick.
those.
Let me be so
And
so
then
it wasn't.
there are a
I'm
group
sorry.
of
Go ahead.
folks who are still on their journey of consciousness that we
Right.
still have to keep pushing and pushing. And
For
to answer
sure. For
your
sure.
question, Sister Rowe, about what our faith tradition says about it, when you look at the ministry of Jesus, it was ultimately a ministry of resistance to the powers that be, to Caesar, right? When
Real
Jesus
talk.
said, I am the king of the Jews, in a sense, that was saying, Caesar, you ain't the king of us. You are not royalty. And so you'll see many, many examples in the New Testament, whether it be the apostles or it be Jesus, who are constantly telling royalty, you have this earthly title of royal, but you are not royalty. And that's also what I saw on my Facebook feed this weekend of black folks saying, hold up, hold up, hold up. Y'all ain't no royalty. This ain't no royal wedding. Okay? These are, and people posting pictures of what we, who our royalty is.
I
So
did that
that's just
too.
to answer your question.
It's clear. It is clear that for a people who have given the world the greatest of the great, and they didn't use the titles of royalty,
Mm-hmm,
but
mm-hmm.
we used, but in some cases we did, because the Duke is the Duke, and the Count is the Count, and Ella was the Queen. And Aretha's the queen today, and Gladys is the empress. Let's just talk about what we've given only in the realm of culture. But in fact about it, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad said it to us this way. And Sister Rowe, you put it up on your Facebook page a couple of days ago. The question is, why do we love the devil?
That's right.
We're using the word devil not in a jingoistic way to point the finger and call names, but the devil is somebody who gives another person hell. And I think if this white man in America who gave us hell for 463 years, who burned us at stake and hung us on trees, and his ears were deaf to our foreparents' pleas, if that man is not the devil, he'll do till the real thing comes along. So for the sake of argument, I'm going to call the white man the devil. Why do we love the devil? It is because he gives us nothing. Now that sounds like a typographical error or a mistake in syntax, but let's look into it. We love the devil because he gives us nothing. Psychologists, after a consultation with doctors Nathan and Julia Hare, and with other psychologists from the American Black Psychologists Association of Black Psychologists, ABPSI, they'll tell you that human beings respond to other human beings who confirm their existing view of themselves.
Yes.
That if you wonder why in the streets of America, some of the most beautiful girls are prostitutes, why some of the most intelligent boys are prostitutes, selling their bodies and subjecting themselves to dangers and vagaries of the street life every day. Why are these beautifully intelligent young people out there doing that? It's because that pimp, that exploiter, that sex trafficker made them believe What they were doing was appropriate to their sense of self. So when you think you are nothing, when you believe you have nothing and come from nothing and can hope for nothing, the person who gives you nothing confirms your belief about yourself, and you incline to that person. You love the devil because he gives you nothing and confirms your twisted, low self-esteem. And so I'm asking us today to now turn and give the devil back everything he gave you. Give him back his understanding of religion. If you don't want Cotton Mather, give Cotton Mather back and take Howard Thurman. If you don't want the Orientalist view of our real Yoruba spirituality, then go to West Africa yourself and learn the Yoruba language and learn the context of the revealed word and learn its applicability in day-to-day life. If you don't want some fake Islam, some Islam that'll have you running around chasing after white folks and inviting the Israelis onto your soil like people are doing in the Islamic world today, if you don't want that fake Islam, then come on to Chicago and Detroit and Philadelphia. Come on down to D.C. and Baltimore and Atlanta and Milwaukee and St. Louis. Come up to Newark and come down to L.A. and you got to stop in San Francisco too and get you some of that good old bow tie, bean pie, Black Muslim orthodoxy. Get it because it's yours and it's defining you and it's making you able to accept your own and be yourself. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad said the greatest 6 words in his teachings are accept your own and be yourself. And when you be yourself, you'll find it however you define yourself. Your own self is a righteous Muslim. You see, the old Ned the Wino, you remember, I don't know, Danielle, you kind of young. You might not remember old Ned the Wino, but he probably got a son. He got a son, Ned Jr., to probably hang out in front of the same liquor store he used to hang out on 112th Street in Harlem. The same liquor store on 22nd and Ridge Avenue in North Philly Road. That same liquor store on 3rd Street and Quesada in San Francisco. That same liquor store got a wino in front of it who's acting smarter than we are. Because you know what? When that wino is begging for a quarter to get him a drink, when he goes in the liquor store to get his drink, he does not care what the label says. He just needs to worry about the content. Does it have the kick? I'm saying the spiritual kick that drives us to unity is what we must search for in our expressions. I don't care if the label says Christian. I don't care if the label says, Oludumare. I don't care if the label says Jehovah. I don't care if the label says Allah. I can look behind it, and like Khadijah Greer said, we can find our way to God, but we can't find our way to God in each other. I'm looking for God in you. This is for the God in you. I'm looking for the God in you. I think I see him. I see him on the 3 screens we got here. I can see one God has on a beautiful teal-colored turban. The other one's looking black with her Wakanda necklace on. And I see another God out there in Sacramento with her print on. See, we got to see God in each other.
I agree. I agree, Jamil. What I was saying, I'm gonna make this last thing about the wedding just so people could be cleared up in the room. I think it's not about if the queen has a minister that is black. I think we get so distracted with that. It doesn't mean, because I feel like if the queen really cared about black people, she would make sure we all got reparations, because she is sitting on reparations. She said all the wealth that England has came off of the sweat of Africans. That's number one. The second thing about it is I find people get very upset when you push them to think and to be accountable to their belief. And that's what I really see. I see people, when you start defending people who really don't need defending, because let me tell you something, the queen was so powerful, she just crowned this girl Duchess. Like, how can she still do that when she's able to do that because of all the suffering that black people that happened to descendants of Africans or whatever we want to call it? That's why they have so much power. And I feel like if you're going to practice your religious belief, stand on that, and don't, it's okay to say, how can this woman be queen? Because I'll tell you this, you're never going to see a Jew celebrating somebody that's mixed with being a Jew, marrying somebody from Nazi Germany's descendants. That you're not going to see them. So there's never going to be a question where they're going to be debating, is this person, we should be celebrating the fact that they fell in love. You're not going to see them do that.
Oh, right.
You're just not going to see them do that.
And that was really one of the points that I was making on the post. And people took it I said, there was no attack on anybody just for watching. You know, it was the only thing on TV. And that shows you something right there, that in every channel, you're being inundated with this. Since when has the mass media taken point to inundate us with something that was for our benefit or uplift?
Right.
Come on now. Just the fact that it's on every single channel, that is the only thing being discussed, it means that it's pushing a particular agenda. And you know that ain't our agenda, you know? And so here's the thing. We just have to understand, as you said, we have to think and we have to understand what we do and what it means. And one of the examples that I used on the post was this. Look, I'm from Harlem. I like gangster rap, right? I like certain songs that I know are degrading to women, are degrading to our communities. And that makes me feel ashamed sometimes. It makes me uncomfortable. It makes me look at myself and say, dang, how much more do you have to evolve so that you will no longer enjoy this? And quite honestly, I'm getting to a point where I don't, you know, to where I hear it. And now because I feel that, I'm like, ooh, I can't listen to this. I can't, you know what I mean? And so this is one of the things I said to a sister too, is that I think this idea of shame is being overemployed as a verb and not enough as a noun. I'm gonna say that again. It's being overemployed as a verb, right? We shaming people and shaming them and shaming them. No, shame is an emotion. It's a noun. It's something we feel when we feel that we've done something wrong. If you do something wrong without anybody saying anything, you can feel shame. Right. And so, and that's a good thing. When you feel shame, it causes you to examine your actions. So if somebody's comment caused another person to feel any kind of shame about watching the royal wedding, that's not because of what the person said. That's because of the feelings they already have of conflict. And all I was pointing out was that conflict, that if we said today, look, we can all be free of white people completely, but we're going to have to rebuild stuff on our own. That we could go over here. Here's all the resources. Here's everything. We don't have to deal with them at all. This is it. No racism, no nothing. Let's go over here. Most black people ain't going. They're not going.
That's right.
That's
so true. That's what I'm talking about.
And so that's what I meant when I said freedom versus the colonizer's table. And it doesn't mean marrying into the British royal family is the only. You know, I've received an elite education. I went to Harvard and all. So, of course, I understand that as Black folks, we are all at the colonizer's table on some level, because that's just the word. But that doesn't mean we got to celebrate it. You don't see me sitting here sniffling and crying every time something happens at Harvard and, oh my God, we should just, like, no, stop it. Like, these people were oppressors. And yes, that $500,000 worth of education I got was reparations. Stop it. Like, no, where enslaved people passed under the campus today. Like, come on. There's no way.
And I know that Jamaica, one of those countries, is asking England for reparations. And I hope that we take to our Facebook feeds and push that. You know, push that. That's going to make them, so she could tell her Black bishop, maybe that'll strike his consciousness. Because I don't know what the purpose is of having Black people in your camp if they're not for Black people. Just say that they're just in your camp. Don't put the Black on it.
You already know what that is. It's tokenism and it's representation, and it's putting, and it's the same things that have been repeated. Like even the pastor's message, bless him and all that. But this same message about love conquers all, love ain't stopping these people from colonizing and killing us. Come on. And
they do it because they do love. They love themselves.
As Brother Jamil pointed out, our hospitality, we are the most hospitable people in the world. As I said, the Brother Dylan Roof was welcomed into that church in the spirit of love. And after sitting there for an hour with those people, praying, having them praying over him, do you know what it has to take for you? Somebody just finished praying over you, speaking to your life, lifting you up, saying whatever they're saying, embracing you to stand up and kill that person.
What that
and you want me to be happy about any ties to anything to do with that? Stop. No, I can't, and I will not.
Thank you.
And that's not righteousness. That's just stupidity.
It's wicked, and that's what's been going on. That's what's been going on. When the Native Americans welcomed those Spaniards onto the shores, the first thing they said was, oh, they got gold, and look, they so nice, we could probably make them slaves, right? Yep. Like, come on, stop it.
The
Right.
thing that we have to realize is, see, you can take it or let it alone. There's the book, I'm sure you all familiar with it. Dr. Bradley wrote the book, The Iceman Inheritance.
Oh,
In The
Yes.
Iceman Inheritance, Bradley talks about the history, and he's a Caucasian scholar from Canada, and I think his first name is Michael. Bradley writes that
It was mad
the
at him.
history of whites has been written in the blood of the darker peoples of the earth. He writes about whites being the single most dangerous agent of murder and slavery and exploitation and deception and pollution and corruption anywhere to be found on the earth. See, we have to deal with this, and black people are afraid of it because for many of us, the most visible and palpable sign of progress, to use that nebulous, cloudy word progress, means for them to get closer to white folks.
To the seat of power.
It means for them to
Exactly.
get closer to the seat of power, to have greater and greater access. And many of our people see Meghan Markle's family as having achieved a family milestone because they're getting away from the consequences of their African DNA and getting closer and closer to the access with white folks. Let's just be honest about it.
yep, that's exactly what it is.
When Dylan Roof came in that church and shot those 9 parishioners, he was not a parishioner. He was not an angel. He was not a brother.
Right,
He
man.
was a devil. And
Right,
see,
an
you don't
angel
like
of
that
death.
language. You don't like what Elijah Muhammad said. You don't like the fact that he told you the white man's the devil. Oh, Elijah, don't say that. But in your heart of hearts, you know that
That
he's
was
a wicked,
truth.
no good demon. You know that what Jesus was dealing with in John the 8th chapter as he wrangled with his opponents from the side of religious respectability and from the side of institutionalized religion. When they came to him and wrangled with him, oh no, he said the truth shall make you free. They said, we never been bond to any man. Jesus got tired of dealing with him in John 8. He said, let me tell y'all something. You are of your father, the devil. Now, if your daddy's a devil, who are you? If your daddy's a Rockefeller, you a Rockefeller. If your daddy is a Mellon, you're a Mellon. If your daddy is a Bush or a Clinton, you a Bush. If your daddy's a devil, then who are you? So now Jesus is dealing. And I believe, I don't have the full translation, but I believe that after Jesus had that discussion with them, he told the disciples, come on, y'all, let's go get us a couple bean pies. That's what I think happened. I believe it happened. I believe in my heart. That's what happened.
Okay, let me just give y'all a closing question because we're gonna be off here at 9. Well, 9 for me, probably like noon for y'all. But my closing question is, I really want y'all to think about this. How do we as black folks challenge ourselves in our religious belief or in our spiritual belief to truly love self, but also hold ourselves accountable to liberation? Because liberation and freedom, first of all, freedom is not free.
Right.
And as much as we just talked about the royal family, they got it in on everybody. The sun never sets on the British Empire. And they didn't get it in by praying for everybody and sitting with everybody, smoking weed. They basically want the war on people and still do to this day. So I'm saying, how do we as black people challenge ourselves with our religious faith to love ourselves, but to also make a conscious strive for liberation? Because that's not easy it's like some of us can't do 2 things at the same time. But how do you propose we do that, y'all, in your closing remarks with that question?
Sister Danielle, why don't, if you want to start, because I know we've been, the last few moments, we've been a little overactive.
It's all good. It's all good. So I guess as you can tell, as I've been speaking, I'm probably not considered the most conventional, if you will. But the way I approach what you're saying is, one is that our experiences are valid. And if there's any tradition that is calling us to take our experience out of the table, that's not the business. So Dr. James Cone, the father of Black liberation theology, started off with the Black experience in looking at the Bible and the sacred text. And when we talk about liberation, if you just scrolling at what the Bible is talking about, Old and New Testament, it's overwhelmed with talking about treating people right. You talk about social justice, lifting up the poor, lifting up the marginalized, those whose backs are up against the wall. The fact that Jesus wasn't kicking it with the royals, Jesus wasn't kicking it with the who's who, the people who are in power. He was kicking it with the people who were disenfranchised. I think that in and of itself should speak to us as Christians as what does that look like today? Who am I kicking it with today? Am I kicking it with the royals? Am I kicking it with the elected officials who are stomping on our people? Am I kicking it with the people in power who are indifferent towards the suffering of my people? That's what we have to ask ourselves, because if we are not following in the footsteps of Jesus. Are we with the folks whose backs are up against the wall? Are we looking for the people who are completely left out of society? And that includes us. That includes us. And loving ourselves is so key. Oftentimes we talk about our body being a temple. Our body is the temple. So you can't go about taking care of everybody else's business and loving and praying for everybody else, but you're not handling this temple here. That's going against what God is talking about. That's going against honoring God. So you have to honor your temple first. I always think of the airplane example when they say, if we going down,
put your mask on first.
Right. Before you try to.
You can't help nobody if you slumped over.
You can't help nobody. Look, so that's how I look at your question, is just really looking at the text and how it applies to our experience as African Americans. If we are sitting in a church that is not speaking about Black Lives Matter, that's not speaking about the inequality, that's not speaking about how 75% of Black wealth was lost in these past 10, 15 years, if you're sitting in a congregation that is not speaking to the pain of your people, get up and go. That is not the gospel. That is not the good news. Our book it's a book of liberation for our people, if you apply it that way. And we see that with now our ancestor, Dr. James Cone, and so many more Black theologians that have laid that out. And the Black church has got to get back to that, or get with it.
Real talk.
Well, I said, the last time I spoke with you, Mama Rose, that, in a world where white supremacy is the rule, doing anything African is revolutionary and is liberatory. So that is how I live it. I get it, how I live it. I rock this 24/7, 365. You can't know me and not know what I'm about. And that's a part of my liberation. That's a part of what, how I help to inspire young men and young women who see me. And I want, those young girls that start pulling on their clothes and looking around when they see me coming, I want them to do that, because not because they should be ashamed, but because they should understand that there are different ways to be beautiful, and that this way that has been pushed, and this way that has been pushed for a reason, because it is suiting other people's purposes, is not the only way. That, you can wear, even my next door neighbor is so sweet. She's a young girl. And when I moved in, she said, oh, well, I'm so happy, I have a professor of Black studies moving in. And that made my heart melt, so I talk to her every chance I get. She's like, you're my own personal Beyonce, because, and that's how it should be with our youth and with everything that we do. We have to, I think that when we and also to recognize that just because one practices African spirituality does not mean that they're woke. Let's keep it 100. Let's keep it 100. There are plenty of people with elekes on that would have gladly changed places with the Duchess and walked down that aisle. There are a lot of people rocking African clothes who are not down for the cause. All skin folk ain't kinfolk. Just because you rock it don't mean you with it. You know what I'm saying? So one of the things to recognize is that it's not enough to declare, it's not enough, and I said this too recently, that I don't care what happens in your ritual rooms. I care what happens when you get up off your knees. right? I don't care what happens while you're praying, while you're doing your ablutions, while you're doing whatever you're doing. I care what happens after that. And so if you get up from there and you have harsh words for people, or if you get up from there and you're not doing anything to better your community, or if you get up from
Real
there
talk.
and all you're concerned about is materialism and money and social climbing and name dropping and this one and that one, and when sister so and so walks in, I'm looking at her funny because my godmother and her godmother had beef and she didn't salute me and her beads ain't as big as mine and all this. You ain't doing the work. You ain't doing the work. You know what I'm saying? Or her gele's bigger than mine, or they Bible, they hats bigger than mine, or his robes flowing better than mine, whatever it is, if that's where your mindset is, you're not doing the work. And so it's about doing this work. It's about getting out here. It's about speaking to young people. I can't express that enough. And it's something that I want to do a lot more of because they're the future. Quite frankly, if you over 40, over 50, I'm not trying to convince you of nothing. You had your time.
That's how I feel.
Right, your mind is ossified. It's a wrap for you. Like if you change your mind, okay, that's cute, that's great. But you're not who I'm concerned about.
Yep.
That's part of the reason why I love being in higher ed, because I get them 18. Like, yeah, now not only are you ready, but you're young, you got the energy, you're still pliable. But I'm not trying to change the minds of no old folks. So, we need y'all. And we need y'all not to stand in the way. And this is another, just I'll close by just saying that the elders too have a responsibility because so many elders want to hold on to power until they die. And it's like, you can't do that. You got to open up your fingers and let the power go to the young people so that they can lead while you're still here and you can guide them in their leadership while you're still here. If they don't get to lead until after you die, that means that now they're leading with no guidance and with no one to show them anything, right? And so that's the point. You got to step back and stop being big mama, priestess, pastor, reverend, whomever you are, and say, listen, it's time for the young people to do this. I'm going to sit back and let you do it, and I'm going to give you a few pointers here and there to keep you on the right track. And so those are the big things that I think, we all need to do across our traditions. And, again, for the African folks to realize that just because you put on a gele and some beads does not mean that you're working for the cause,
Real
right?
talk.
You still have to do something beyond that.
Real talk, sister. Thank you. Brother Jamil?
I want to close by saying thank you first to Allah for the opportunity to be in this gathering. I'm thankful that modern technology has made this possible.
Sure.
Often the use of modern technology is irresponsible and often corrosive and destructive. But this morning, Ro, you have honored us by corralling the forces of electronic technology to bring us together to talk about the rise of our people. I'm very grateful for that. I have heard from my sisters this morning, and I'm sure I'll see when I'm able to read the comments. I have heard so much Islam that y'all don't even know. I guarantee you, unless you've been committed to the study of Islam as an academic pursuit, as an intellectual focus, you may not know that what you've talked about, sisters, from beginning to end of this conversation is from the body, the text, the width and breadth of this book, the Holy Quran. This is the book that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad said he would not rest until it became the law of the land for our people. And you say, wait a minute, I don't subscribe to Islam. That can't be my law. Wait a minute. You're not going to be my law. But no, it's not about the letter of the law in the Quran per se. It is about the inculcation of the principles of divine that are expressed in the different forms that we've heard here this morning. When my sisters spoke, like Sister Danielle talked about the ethic of the church, basically enter to worship and depart to serve. What she talked about was the basis of Quranic understanding of community life and economics. When my sister, Dr. Funlayo, talked about the need for us to define ourselves according to who we're created to be, and then to serve a community who has gotten as far away from creation as they ever have been, as we ever have been. We're outside of our nature. Old people hanging on to authority because they really don't want authority and responsibility. They want notoriety and vanity. You see? They want control and they want domination. This idea of domination of the creation, they ignored the basic etymology of the word domination, which comes to us from dominus, or Lord. And in Islam, we understand that what a Lord is the word in Arabic is Rabbi, which then goes to Hebrew as Rabbi, teacher, nurturer, supporter, developer of a creation by stages until it reaches its eventual perfection. That's what a Lord is. These people are not lords, they are demons in Lord's clothing. Remember, dear brothers and sisters, we got a lot of work to do. I've got work to do as an individual. Each of us have work to do as individuals. And sister, I want to know, I guess I can't sell you all my old Sugar-Free and Dr. Dre CDs because you trying to get rid of yours.
I'm trying to get my life right. But holla at me anyway, though, because the Chronic was my joint. I can't even front on that. I'm a 90s baby all day.
Get your money while you playing with it. Get your money while you playing with it. I mean, we're gonna work it out. You know?
Right.
But I'm suggesting to you,
Little Ghetto Boy is the one redeeming quality of that.
But I'm suggesting in closing, sisters, that there is love in God for us as individuals, and he loves our people. We are not cast off. We are not thrown away. I want you to know that God said that the stone that the builder rejected. Everybody walked past the Negro. Every immigrant came into America, and they said, where's the end of the line for opportunity and benefit in the golden gates of America? They said the opportunity line go way to the back, right in front of the Negroes. There you go. That's where you get in line. That's what I'm talking about. And everybody got in line. They rejected us. They despised us.
It's
they
the
laughed
truth.
at us.
Truth is the light, man.
But today, brother and sister, God is on scene, and God has come to rescue, to seek, and to save that which was lost. In Genesis, the 15th chapter, we read of God saying to Abram, know of a surety that thy seed will be a stranger in a strange land, and they will serve that people, and that people will afflict them 400 years. Say, but after that time, I'm going to come. God said, I'm coming myself. I'm not going to send nobody else. I'm coming myself to seek and to save my people. Any people that God loved enough that he would come and seek and save us himself, we must be a very special people. So when you look at us today, don't look at us and shake your head about how ignorant we are. Look at our ignorance and shake your head in wonderment about how great God is, because we're in a condition that only he can save us from. Only the divine supreme being, the Lord of all the worlds, the master of the universe and all of its laws, regulations, and rules, only that one can come and seek and save us. And if we are going to be relevant, we got to be about the work of saving his people, because that's number one on his mind. He's going to rescue you. He's going to save you. And he's going to bring you back. Ooh, I love y'all. Ooh, I love y'all.
I'll tell you this, brother. I'll tell you this, dear family. It's obvious how powerful we are as a people. I mean, if we can't preach you down, we'll juju you down. I mean, we have everything that we need. We just have to have some commitment to get free. Because Lord knows we done create it. If we ain't got it, we'll create it. That's how bad we are. Nobody survived what we've been through and still be here and lift up everybody else amongst the way. We just have to lift ourselves up. So I thank you all. This was so enlightening. I love that we was able to have conversation about it. People were able to talk from their perspective and then even lean into other people's. There's something about leaning in that I think that's something that we do very well, because Lord knows when we travel, we still have to lean into people, especially when we're in places that are not that where we're from, but we know how to lean in, but we don't lose ourselves. We don't jump in and dive in. We just lean a little bit to know where we are so we can navigate ourselves around wherever we're at. So I want to thank all three of y'all. You guys were the bomb. It was a great conversation. And I look forward to talking with you all. Thank you so much for making time. This was really a most important conversation. And I hope that we continue to have it and bridge those gaps of unity, because Lord knows we need it, especially in this special time. I think liberation is very close, to be very honest with you.
Yes.
It's not going to be
Sister Jamil
broadcast on
was trying to
Facebook.
say something.
Huh?
Oh, I just want to say one more thing
Huh?
is for the folks who are watching, I saw it's 54 shares, is how can we replicate this on a day-to-day basis?
Oh,
And so for those who are watching today, whatever tradition that you are a part of, um, visit other traditions, other ceremonies, and come with an open heart. Too oftentimes we feel that our way is the only absolute answer and everybody else is wrong and they need to be changed. We're not going to make progress as a people. We're not going to get liberated as a people if we continue to think that way. So push that to the side and build with our brothers and sisters of different faith traditions. See what we have in common, respect the differences, and let's build.
real talk, sister. Thank you so
Okay.
much. Anybody else want to add anything on before I sign off?
I think we've said it all. That's a
All
beautiful
right,
way to
y'all.
close.
Thank you, y'all. Thank you so much. And as we leave out, what is your one word that you when you finish your prayer? What do you all normally say when you finish? Because to me, the whole conversation was a prayer, but that's just me.
Yes.
What is the
And
word?
we
How do
say
you close your
Ashe.
prayer? Ashe.
Ashe.
What about you, Danielle?
Amen.
Amen. Brother Jamil.
I mean.
All right, family. Peace.
All right,
Peace.
peace.